Well, this is the last session before lunch, and very happy to have this session at this point of time about Internet of Things and wearables. This, as you know, is a subject of great interest and a hot debate. The possibilities are endless, with so many things that are going to change our life. And the question is, till now, we were always talking about IT when it was B2B, B2C, C2C. But now we have this endless opportunities where machines are getting linked up. So I'm not sure all the alphabets that will get linked up, M to B, M to C, and whatever else. There's also this debate that with wearables and what's happening of Internet of Things, is it intruding too much? Do we really want that device to know so much about ourselves, which we didn't know ourselves till now? And I think that's a debate which I'm sure you would. Every time a new destructive technology comes up, there is this debate. At the end of it, the benefits far, far outweigh any of the downsides that are there, and I'm sure this is what the panel will discuss. And we have here Mr. Ricardo Álvarez, who is going to be taking us through as moderating this. He is a researcher at the Senseable City Lab, as well as a doctoral student at the Department of Urban Studies Planning at MIT. His research has been focused on development of prototypical urban forms and role of large-scale integrated digital system in future cities, which I think makes you really the right person to do this here. He has been, prior to MIT, held several roles in the Mexican government. He was also the founding member of Pro Mexico, which I think is a co-host here, so I'm sure you're very happy to see them hosting this session here. He has also worked there as the advisor to the CEO and ultimately the coordinator of innovation and strategic products. He has been a speaker at NASDAQ, at Council of Americas, Vancouver, IT Bangalore, we just spoke about it, and Picnic Amsterdam, among others. So, ladies and gentlemen, over to Ricardo here. All the best.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. Today we have a great panel. We're fortunate enough to have with us anywhere from big companies, startups, as well as researchers, marketeers, entrepreneurs, engineers. And I'm going to introduce the panel. Here we have with us Vida Ilderem. She's Vice President of Intel Labs. We have Stephen P. Nelson, Director of Marketing from Freescale Semiconductor. We have Fernando Tubilla, who is the co-founder of Geonecta and is also a researcher at Kiva Systems. And we have Max Tem from Cisco Systems. So as you can see, there's a whole array of companies that are anywhere from data transmission, sensors, research on the building blocks of technology, as well as some of the applications that we're hearing about in the Internet of Things. And I'm going to start with kind of an opener question. We know that we hear a lot about Internet of Things being this kind of very new revolution that's happening on things talking to each other through the network. And in all different sorts of manifestations, anywhere from smart cities to smart homes, wearables, large-scale systems. But first I would like you to introduce us. Where does this come from, right? What's the background behind the Internet of Things that has led us to this point where we are today?
I go first? Okay. So Internet of Things has been there for a long time under different names. Network sensor, sensor network, cyber physical. So it's a very old market, if you may, coming from embedded system side of thing. So you ask why now? Why is it so important right now? And one reason is that, actually two reasons. One is cost of compute has come down and is available. High performance, low power compute is available to everyone to do something with. And the second thing is most of things are becoming connected. So with the advance of connectivity, access to bandwidth, networks, and affordable connectivity, now you see this market taking off and becoming more interesting for people. So I would say my colleague in Freescale can talk about the numbers of the why this market is attractive.
So Yes, if you think about you know, the technology as an industry, there are factors. You know, it loves critical mass, it loves high volume, and it loves an ecosystem. So when you think about the basic building blocks for IoT have been developed, again, over maybe a decade or more. Now you can, you know, for literally, you know, for just dollars, you can have high performance, you can have sensing, you can have some computation and connectivity. So you have these basic building blocks. And I think what's really interesting about the world of IoT is it's not necessarily taking industries and making new ones. There are certainly new opportunities, but it's also taking this basic connectivity and these building blocks and applying them to industries really that already exist. It's not about reinventing things. And all of a sudden you may have an industry that hasn't really seen innovation in 50 years, but all of a sudden through a handful of electronics that is built over, again, that's why cell phones and all of the other things that we all carry, all of that builds, all of that drives costs down, it drives critical mass, it drives standards. So all of a sudden you have a handful of processing and IoT building blocks, and you can reinvent an industry, I won't say overnight, but certainly very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I mean, we've been hooking up things to the web for a while, but now with the increases in technology, it's becoming, the scale and the scope of what we can do it's been growing, and it's going to keep growing. Just as an example, in Kiva systems, a traditional warehouse, if you order something from a website, let's say green t-shirt, a blue pair of pants, a traditional manual warehouse, you'll have someone walking through aisles and picking stuff and putting it into a cart and then trying to assemble it together and ship it to you. But now that you have a warehouse that's connected, that you have hundreds or thousands of drive units that can go and fetch inventory and bring it to the pick worker, now you have this degree of connectivity that allows you to do much cooler things. You can do much more with that system because you can make it adaptive. Maybe you start getting a demand of a lot of green t-shirts, so you can start bringing those shelves proactively closer to the warehouse. So I think these sort of things where you get a finer degree of control and actuation of a system, such as a warehouse or a smart city, that's what's making the Internet of Things so attractive now.
Well, you know, I see it as a natural evolution of technology, that it's allowing us to go further than we could some years ago. You know, IT technologies have demonstrated that the GDP of a country can be increased between 1.5 and 3%, and that's a huge amount of economic impact, right? But we started with computers getting into the network, then we start plugging other things into the network like IP phones, smartphones, and then suddenly the technology starts to catch up. Now we have IPv6 that really is an address, basically, that can make that we connect basically anything we want, anything we can imagine. We have now an IP address for every single atom in the earth, right? Then you have cloud computing together with big data that can gather all this information from the sensors, and then you can really process that data and make some useful use of that information. And then we have security that is evolving together, the mobility, and of course the Ethernet technology that has allowed us to bring down the costs. All these technologies are getting together. The networking is shifting the paradigm with application-centric infrastructure. And all these technologies bring together is what it's really allowing us to get into the Internet of Things.
So when thinking about these different technologies, talking about sensors, talking about connectivity, talking about big data, what would you consider to be the building blocks of the Internet of Things? Not only as it's happening today, but even if you think about it conceptually as we move forward into the future, okay? What are the technologies that we need to put in place to actually achieve that vision, both in large scale, but also in human terms?
Okay, I can go. So if you look at the term Internet of Things, it's about Internet and things.
Yeah.
So if you start with the things side of it, so you need low energy compute, okay? So when you look at low energy from the technology standpoint, you say, do I need to be always on. So that means you have to have very low power or harvest energy from environment. So that's one block. Then compute is another block. Sensors, what are you sensing, which is elemental to that. Then all this information, of course, it goes with memory, storage, and everything else around this package. Then the next block you look at technology is the internet side of it. So this brings the connectivity. You have connectivity at the local level. So if you talk wearables, which is some people term it as personal IoT because it's about devices on you and with you. So in that case, you're talking about Bluetooth low energy, sometimes Wi-Fi, so personal and wide local area network. And then sometimes you communicate directly to a microcell, so that's your cellular side of it. Then you take that connectivity, then you're generating data, what you do, so you get into data centers. Now you need different type of performance. You not only need low energy, but you also need very high performance. Parallel programming, how do you program things? Analytics is a big deal.
Yes.
How do you filter this data? How do you look at that, the data? And amongst all of this technology-wise, then it becomes the security. How do I secure the data? And how do I manage all these sensors in the field? So manageability, security, interoperability are big technology blocks to make this deployable in a wide scale.
Yeah, I agree. There are a couple of blocks you can define, and number one certainly is power. I mean, we look at technologies, and the single line you can draw says, well, are things run on the battery, or they run on AC, or are they connected to the grid?
Yes.
That makes that's the number one decision, because if you're on a battery, all of a sudden you have to deal with power management is critical. We have customers that say, I can only transmit 2 seconds a day or something to run on a coin cell, right? That's where, again, you think about where wearables and those type of technologies, there's a benefit of not just the things you're going to wear, but it's obviously pushing the envelope constantly on battery life. Do I have to charge something every day? So it's number one is about things that are going to be powered by batteries, low power. That's where you see things in both processing and in RF transmission. They're going to be critical. The other part of it is, if you look at IoT today, it's very vertical. People kind of have the thing that they've created, and then it connects to a consolidator or some kind of gateway, and then it goes to its cloud, right? And so when we, especially in the marketing world, and we can sit here and we can think of all these very futuristic future cases of how IoT and what it's going to do in medical and all of these cases. The true power comes only when this information is shared across different silos that exist today. If you think about smart cities, right? Well, you got to get data maybe from traffic management or from water and energy, and that's when things really start benefiting. Well, in order to do that, the industry, there's got to be standards, there's got to be communication, there's got to be all of these things that bring the data together. So, those are, to me, are I think the primary gaps, I'll say, today. I mean, security, we're going to talk, I'm sure, at a point about security and privacy. But I think overall it's about getting things into that future state, and how do you create this future case where the information is shared?
I would just like to add to that once you have all that hardware and sort of the communication link established, then there's also, like was said, the issue about the data and what do you do with it. And I think having so much data from so many different streams and making sense of it and trying to use it in a meaningful way is also creating new challenging problems. I mean, of course, there's a lot of machine learning there. What do you do with the data? How do you sort of reduce the amount of data into some subset of data that's manageable and where you can get actual insights? And also on top of that is, once you have the data, once you do it, I don't know, prediction or just description of what is that the data is telling you, how do you do prescription, right? How do you make decisions based on that data in a way that's manageable when you start scaling to hundreds of billions of devices?
In Cisco, we like to think of Internet of Things, taking it a little bit further away. We talk about Internet of Everything.
Yes.
That has two different components. No, when we talk about Internet of Things, we talk about things and data. But when we talk about Internet of Everything, we have processes and people. So with those four pillars, then we can bring down some other blocks of technologies that we have to use, right? From one side, if we are talking about people-to-people connections or machine-to-people connections, we're talking about collaboration technologies, telepresence, and that kind of things, right? Then if we talk about processes, we need technology and analytics that can work for different verticals, healthcare, education, manufacturing. And talking about that, you also need to decide where you put this technology, right? We are talking about fog computing, where you put the analytics on the edge of the network. So for example, if you have a video camera with analytics, they don't have to be pushing all the information up, but they can make their own decisions, and when they see different things happening that bring up a red flag, then you have to do that. Yeah. And basically, just to add, because all the technologies they talk about are part of the building blocks, I will just add that you have to put context-aware technology. Either if you're a doctor and you have access to a medical record on a hospital, but you cannot do it if you are at the Starbucks. Why? Because other people could be seeing that information, so you're not allowed to see that information in that network. So this context-aware technology will be really important for the building blocks.
So this is very interesting, because when you see the amount of data that is currently being generated through the Internet of Things, right? And kind of forecasting the explosion of sensors that are going to be deployed onto the ground and onto infrastructure and onto wearables in the foreseeable future. I hear a lot of talk about data, and data is actually very sexy to talk about, right? Oh yeah, we're going to get data about everything, and we're going to know everything. But that's not really optimal. And I also see in research circles a lot of people talking about meaningful data. What's the data that actually makes sense? You can connect a coffee pot to Facebook, but it probably doesn't make much sense, right? Probably it's not a very interesting conversation between those two. And if I look at society in general, which doesn't really tend to be data literate, okay? You're talking about a large-scale interface, of systems, a large scale of systems that ultimately will need a human side, a human interface, a human interpretation, and a human-centered meaning of the data that it's producing. How do we address that challenge moving forward?
Okay, if you wish, we change around. Well, one of the things that we're working on, because you're right, this is getting so complex that we need to take the complexity out of it, so it can be more useful for more people. So, for example, we are now working on abstracting the complexity of all the infrastructure, the data centers, the network, the security, and change the paradigm of networking to applications where you can see the health of the network. So you can have an application engineer, or you can have somebody from marketing looking at the technology, but with a friendly interface. The health of the network, the health of the whatever you're measuring, right? And then you can start digging down when you have the need to, and then you can pass it on to other people inside your company. So those as complexity abstractions are some of the things that we really need to make it broad. The other one is cloud. If you can start putting IoE or IoT analytics in the cloud, the storage in the cloud, security in the cloud, if you can put security, one of the things that we're working is not just work on the attack when it's happening, but you have to work before the attack, during the attack, and after the attack. Those are kind of the things that we are doing to make it approachable for everybody.
I mean, I think this is definitely one of the biggest challenges, and my background is in operations research and controls, and there we study problems of you have a resource, you have a need, and you have certain constraints, and you want to match them together. And I think the Internet of Things is bringing up a lot of these types of problems. You have a smart grid where you have some excess generation capacity, and you want to match it with some load in the network. So in order to start making sense of this data, we'll have to have smart algorithms that can do that by themselves, that can make these decisions in real time. And that brings a lot of issues about robustness, about how can we make sure that the algorithms work correctly, even if the data is incorrect or if the data is missing. And those are challenging research problems that I think we'll keep working on as we get more and more stuff connected.
You know, again, I think if you think of the nature of our industry, it, you know, people walk around with so much storage, right? You can get a 1 gigabyte stick. So I think there's this idea that storage is free. So we can just continue to put all this data in. Sometimes I use this scenario of, you know, I think about a room full of like 1,000 screaming babies that are all just screaming, and there's no way them to make sense of all of that. And you know, that's why when you think about what the industry provides about with processing and lower costs of processing, because then you can make decisions and intelligence further down in the network, right? You want to be able to operate by exception. You know, it's not about if you have a thermostat that every 20 seconds it reports that it's 73 degrees, 73 degrees, you know. Okay, after a point you get it, it's 73 dang degrees, they're going on. Well, at a point you want to exist by exception and then report what's going, you know, and then that information that then becomes relevant. Well, to how much did it change? Well, gosh, does that mean maybe there's an issue with the system? Is there a fire? Is there, you know, you're looking at the changes in the information. Medical's the same way, right? Then you need to be able to look at what's going on with a person, you know, that is an exception to what they've been doing, set up the baseline. So the idea, and again, where we see the IoT developing is about more and more intelligence at lower and lower levels, right? The data that goes up, how long do you keep it there? You know, what information is stored? It's going to get out of hand, as we all know. So again, you know, we just see intelligence coming in at lower and lower levels, so that you're operating on exception versus just a constant flood of information that may or may not be relevant.
So I'm going to take a different approach to answer this question. Why would people care about this data? So let's bring it to a personal level in a sense of why people are wearing these watches and Fitbands and all this. So people care about wellness and health, or they're starting to more care about fitness and wellness. So if you look at this personalized data, how does it change my behavior? What's my motivation? I want to lose weight, so I don't care how many calories. How do you make me lose weight by giving me this data, right? So one is you have to interact with data. We have a university research with several universities in US, and we've looked at the behavior. So if you give me just the calories by taking a picture or do whatever, and it automatically gives me feedback, I don't care. But if I have to enter what I ate and I get the numbers, then I'm more engaged. And so you have to engage the human with the data. The other study we are doing is on the fitness side of it, health side of it, maybe we can call it, is people who are stressed or who are have migraines or have asthma. How do you make them change their behaviors or take action based off the data that their phone or their wearable is passing them to them? So there is a lot of bit of gathering information from social information from crowd, right? So people put today's pollen is high, you know, don't leave, you know. Or I get headache because I've already entered, you know, I ate this thing, or the weather pollution is this, or there's this type of a pollen. You start building correlation. Yes. And with those correlations, then you can take action. Then the data is really valuable to you as an individual. So I think from wearables and health side, we can learn how to interact human with the data, to get motivated, to change behavior, what's in it for me. And I think we can apply that to the grid, to the home, to other aspects of this market segment.
But you raise an important point in the sense that, for example, when we talk about wearables, there is an obvious implication, let's say, for the healthcare industry, right? At some level, depending on the capacities of, you know, our sensing capabilities that we can put, you know, on our watches or armbands or whatever. But there is also a larger social trend of self-quantification, of people wanting to know what is it that they do, how is it that they behave. And there's a matchup of those two trends. How do you see that trend actually evolving the nature of all the sensors that we carry with us in the future? For example, you guys are Freescale, are
Sure.
essentially in the business of sensors. What is the sensor portfolio for people, in the next 10 years, and how do we move the quantification process on the information that we're willing to see to the system?
You're right. There's certainly a dynamic of how people will adapt and use technology, and how does it fit into their daily lives.
Yeah.
Because there's, you get something new, you got the new present, you start using it, and then, over time, you start to realize, okay, what am I really learning from this? Is it as something I'm having to be, very active on and deal with a lot, or is it something now that is kind of faded into the background? A lot of the growth when I think of IoT is about things that now they just kind of exist as far as your normal flow. I live in Austin, Texas, and there's a couple of factors. We have a lot of the militant exercise crowd. It's a very health conscious city. A lot of people swimming and biking and all this, and so they look at wearables and people track their fitness, right? But when you think about the everyday person, what are they learning? Then how do they use that to adapt into their daily lives? There was also, it kind of starts touching on smart energy, where there's a project called the Pecan Street Project. This was an area where the old Austin airport was located, which was close to downtown. So when they left the airport, there was a lot of land there that they could develop, and they kind of made this, I don't want to say city of tomorrow, but it was an advanced area where you kind of had to apply to live there, and they actually were going to track what you did in your house, and they go to the University of Texas and they track the information and the things that they have found out about behaviors. And again, these are people that are, again, they're kind of militant, eco people. They want to live in Pecan Street Project, and after a certain point in time, they realize, that they can't, monitoring the temperature in your house is not a, it's not something that you do, it's not a constant game, a battle. It's got to work its way, because all of a sudden, guess what? You got to go to work and change the baby's diapers or whatever else goes on in your daily life.
Yeah.
And so, again, when we think about the personal side, about sensing and data acquisition, these things are very much in front of people, but at a point, they're going to learn from the information, and then they're going to figure out how and that's what we do today, right? We wear things and we start thinking about, now, how do I use this normally? How do I, adapt? Because guess what? I want to live a life. I want to do these other things, so.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, my personal case, I also started tracking my sleep, and at first it was a little bit annoying to keep a sensor to track your sleep, but then when you start seeing the value of the data, like you can figure out exactly how much hours of sleep you need to have to feel refreshed the next morning. I think as soon as you start associating the value that you're gaining from these sensors, you sort of break that barrier of the probably annoying or difficult part it takes to implement the sensors in the first place. And the other part is that, like as you showed, Ricardo, in your talk yesterday, all the sensors that we're already carrying in our devices already have so much information. They can tell us so much, maybe not so much about individuals, but us as a group. And I think the trend of learning about that data that's being generated is also showing us a lot about how economies work, how we exchange ideas, and stuff of that nature is really interesting.
No, technology is just a tool.
Yeah.
And how you deploy it, how do you use it, could make a good usage or a bad usage, right? And it will come to a personal decision how much information you want to share about yourself and to who you want to share it with, right? So here, two things come into play, security and privacy. So you could have all the sensors you want, but you need to trust who you're giving that information to make it available for you. And we just have, I think, to train people to educate people on what security means and what privacy means. It's like, one question I hear a lot is, if you want to deploy Internet of Everything, isn't it too risky? And the same thing was being asked 10 years ago with e-commerce. Today, I feel more comfortable going to one of the big web services to buy stuff than when my bank calls me on the phone to ask me for my credit card number. No, I share with my wife my location because it helps us on our daily life. I can imagine a lot of people not wanting to share that information with their wives, right? I have nothing to hide. So then again, it's a personal choice. You have many applications to do, but you just have to make sure that you know what you're doing. No?
But it's a,
Can
sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, I think that's, you know, touching on the privacy side of this. I mean, your question earlier was about, you know, what do we see maybe as hurdles, or what is the, and I certainly see, you know, we've seen some recent cases, right, where Facebook was changing people's news feeds and then seeing how they responded to that. And,
Yeah.
and there was kind of a big uproar, and they said, well, you know, wait, if you look at the terms and conditions, which nobody reads, right, it says down there that they can do that. You know, I purchased a new phone recently, and in order to get the thing working, I can't tell you how many click-through agreements that I went through that said, oh, sure, you can do all of those things. And when I got finished, I thought, what the heck did I just authorize any number of companies to track on me? What have I done? And I think the realization of people about those decisions and about the, you know, and this is where obviously governments and countries, you know, are really looking at this very seriously. And there's a lot of, you see a lot of difference between European countries and America, what's going on. And I think that realization of you know, again, as a marketing person, for every nirvana scenario that I can draw out in IoT, there's an equal scenario that I think about security and privacy that can have a huge impact. And I hope that we as the industry solve the security and these type of issues before they, you know, they kind of get out of hand. And you see more, I mean, obviously credit card breach, and you see a lot of the things that are going on. But those aren't big, okay, someone gets your credit card, you know, what's the worst that happens? You call the credit card, you know, it's no, but we're talking about connecting infrastructure. That's different, right? We're talking about connecting power plants and grids and controlling things, and those are, you know, the different level of impact, so.
So this is important because we often have an easy relationship with the digital services that we use, okay, in which we are acutely aware and increasingly aware of the, you know, data privacy concerns. What is the information that I'm giving the system? The old adage that, you know, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product, right? And at the same time, we are increasingly incapable of, you know, living our daily lives without, you know, all sorts of digital services. But underlying that, when we have the capacity to essentially record a lot of your personal activity, okay, and which kind of moves into a system, a larger system that is losing its capacity to forget, which is a very basic human condition. It's a very basic human condition. And what are the structural changes that need to happen, if you want, on the human institutional side? As you said, technology is a tool. There needs to be a catch-up from the institution side to actually balance that system.
Well, you know, part of what you were saying, no, there's so much information, nobody reads licensing agreements, so the government comes into place, and we were talking a little bit about that backstage, where the governments are always one step behind of the technology, and that's natural because the technology moves so fast, right? And then we will have to evolve to really put the regulations that make sense, so we protect the consumer. But at the same time, we think we have to think about the businesses. It's just like happens today with a service provider that today is putting bandwidth and bandwidth and bandwidth and spending hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure so you can see your movie at home, but the one that is taking this money from the movie is not paying for that infrastructure. So it's a balance between, we have to find a win-win solution for the consumer, for the business, between businesses and the government. So that's a huge challenge that we have today, and it's up to us, the public sector and the private sector working together to make these regulations come to market much faster, and also to adapt them as soon as we see the best practices across the world.
I can take that. IoT a little bit challenges the privacy laws. I think people have to look at the privacy laws very carefully now. For instance, when you apply for the credit card, when you sign to get the credit card, you're already giving them permission to use your data. You don't know that, but you need the credit card, but you have to give that away. So when do you have that? The other thing is, if you look at in US, the insurance companies can rule. How are they going to use this data? Are they going to deny you insurance because you're overweight or you drive too fast or you have too many tickets? So I think, so that's a little bit of regulation side of it, but also privacy. How are they going to use the data that I'm generating, which I'm not opting in to share, to come back and get me down the road? So I think there is that distance, but as this technology develops and it gets more deployable, it's going to force the issue, and there are things that have to happen. So,
if I think I'd address that question maybe and look at the other side, right? I mean, again, it's easy for us. I mean, we're all people. We can relate to home and connected things and all that. But if you look at the other side of IoT, which is really the commercial industrial space, which is as was pointed out, in our opening comments, this is part of IoT that has been growing literally for, I won't say decades, but a period of time. Why? Because businesses solve problems for specific reasons, for financial benefit, to get ahead in marketplaces, right? And so some of the things that we worry about, or can talk about as consumers, businesses solve these in a very specific way, right? They, Hilton Hotels announced maybe just in the last couple of weeks that they're going to replace all of the door locks on all their global hotels. I think it's about 650,000 globally with smart locks, right? Now, as a consumer, I've always kind of wondered about the whole connected door lock thing. I don't necessarily want to lock at my house. I don't see a real benefit for me as a consumer as a standalone device. But in the commercial spaces, in office buildings and hotels, huge market. And so if you think, their stated goal is you'll be able to choose your room and do all these things in your Hilton hotel. You won't have to go to the front desk. You'll be able to go right to the room. It'll connect and all of these great things. And they're handling all of that as a specific business enterprise. Privacy, yeah, there's a point. I do want to maybe think about how much they're tracking my coming and going of my hotel room to talk, those kind of things. But at a point on the commercial side, the privacy things tend to fade a little bit into the background, right? I mean, they're solving business problems, right? They're solving city ecosystem problems. They're looking at agriculture, right? There are certainly some things about, in any business, if I'm a farmer and I have a certain product and certain seeds, this is a real case in the US, by the way, who owns the data about how my crops are doing with that seed versus the farmer down the road? Is it the seed company? Is it somebody else? And so, but to the point, I mean, these privacy issues are all very real and they can get us really agitated. Yeah. But I think when I look at the commercial, I love that side of this industry because I love the people, businesses and industries and governments look at things for real reasons, for real dollars.